Alien girl was thrown into the junkyard as worthless in her capsule, but a human found it and opened it. The wind on Tarnus V didn't scream. It hissed. Low. Constant. Like something broken refusing to die. Snowflakes drifted sideways, catching on jagged metal and frost-covered pipes. There was no beauty in this place, just ruin and cold. Jaren Thorne moved slowly between heaps of dead machinery, stepping over rusted tubing and half-crushed drone husks. His black utility coat was patched in 3 places, a thermal shirt visible underneath. His jeans were faded, stiff with grime. He wore reinforced boots with scuffed toes. Every step crunched against brittle frost, the sound swallowed quickly by the wind. He was 38, ex-cargo engineer. Used to work the sky routes between orbital colonies. Back before a docking bay, fire nearly killed half his crew. He got out alive. Most didn't. After that, he didn't go back. He took a settlement payout and disappeared here, Tarnus V. A forgotten moon where corporations dumped obsolete tech and broken people. Now he scavenged what he could. Sold parts. Repaired small machines for other outcasts who still paid in scrap or survival rations. This wasn't hero work. It wasn't even a job. It was staying alive. The scrapyard on the edge of Grid 14 wasn't on the colony map. 2. Unstable. Half the stacks had collapsed in a fuel fire months ago. Most salvagers avoided it. But Jaren knew unstable often meant unpicked. He scanned the field ahead. Crates warped by heat. A burned-out crawler engine embedded in snow. In the distance, the jagged hull of an old mining hauler stuck out of the ground like a torn ribcage. A faint, rhythmic blink caught his eye. Red light. Faint. Almost dead. He adjusted his grip on the crowbar and moved closer. The light came from under a collapsed section of cargo shells. Large panels stacked against each other like a broken wall. He crouched, slid aside some loose conduit, and saw it. A stasis capsule. Glass front. Model C-class, with built-in cryostim injectors. Half buried and cracked. His gut clenched. These were used by black market medical couriers. Sometimes smugglers. Sometimes worse. He brushed the glass. A thin film of frost melted under his glove. The lights blinked red again. Low oxygen warning. Inside, something shifted. He froze. A body lay curled in the pod. Small. Female. Bare skin exposed in several places. Shackles at the wrists and ankles. The bodysuit she wore was torn, silver-colored, meant more for presentation than protection. It hugged her hips and thighs, high-cut, and left her shoulders exposed. There were slashes at her midsection and hips, some intentional, part of the design. Others looked like wear. Her knees were pulled up, arms folded close. White hair covered most of her face. His first thought, dead. Second thought, she blinked. Jaren stepped back, pulse rising. He checked for any kind of transponder. No ID beacon. No corporate stamp. Just a faint laser etch near the base. Varellum Biosystems, Fertility Cast 4B. He exhaled slowly. He'd heard of these programs, designed by Population Corp Labs for colonization campaigns. The fertility cast women were genetically enhanced to breed efficiently, remain physically desirable, and emotionally compliant. But most of the programs had been shut down when the scandals broke. Accidents, malfunctions, suicides. Some of the discarded assets were sold cheap. Others were dumped. He looked again. Her lips parted. Breath misted the inside of the glass. Alive. Barely. Jaren didn't think. He moved. He pried open the access panel on the capsule side and yanked out the decaying circuit fuses. Sparks flared. The lock disengaged with a loud clack. Cold vapor hissed out as the capsule cracked open. The woman didn't move. Her breathing was faint, eyes flicking behind closed lids. He dropped to one knee. "Hey, can you hear me?" His voice was calm, steady. No answer. He hesitated, then reached inside. His fingers brushed her arm. Her skin was freezing. The moment he touched her, she twitched. Lips tightened. She didn't speak, just flinched at contact, then froze again. Her reaction wasn't instinctual. It was rehearsed, conditioned. He quickly took off his coat and wrapped it around her. She didn't resist, but she didn't accept it either. She simply stared past him. "You're not trash," he said under his breath. No response. He lifted her carefully, arms under her knees and back. She was lighter than expected, malnourished. Her head fell against his chest, and her body trembled. Whether from cold or fear, he wasn't sure. As he carried her back through the yard, he couldn't stop scanning the horizon. Drones sometimes patrolled the outer salvage zones, security bots looking for unauthorized signals. If the capsule had a residual tag, someone might already be tracking it. His thoughts raced. If she was tagged, she was property. Illegal property. He should walk away. But he didn't. The inside of his shelter was small. An old drop hauler flipped into a bunker. Power ran from salvaged solar panels. The heater buzzed in the corner. He cleared the cot with one arm, sweeping aside blankets and old gear. He set her down gently. She curled into herself, pulling the coat tighter. "Safe now," he said. She looked at him, not fully. Her eyes darted to his hands. His boots. The floor. Never met his gaze. He turned and removed the cuff locks, simple magnetic clamps. They came off with a snap. She didn't react, only drew her knees closer. The coat fell open slightly, revealing the top straps of her bodysuit. He averted his eyes and tucked the coat around her again. He heated water, poured it into a mug. When he brought it over, she stared at it like she didn't understand what it was. "Drink," he said, placing it beside her. Still nothing. Then a whisper, barely audible. "Why?" He stopped. "Why what? Why not chain?" He frowned. "Because you're not a prisoner." She blinked. Her lips trembled. "But I failed." Jaren sat on a crate across from her. "Failed what?" She shook her head, eyes dropping. Her fingers fidgeted with the coat sleeve. "Last pairing. They said I was broken. Mind fracture." He nodded slowly. He'd seen this kind of trauma before, on crew after long isolation runs. The silence. The touch starvation. The training. "You're not broken," he said. "You don't know me. I don't have to." The mater glanced at him, just for a second. Later that night, he heard movement. She stood near the edge of the cot. The coat had slipped off her shoulders. She held it loosely in one hand, her body tense, awkward. She looked at him. "You want payment?" "No." Her brow furrowed. "I can earn." Jaren stood. "That's not what you're for." She stepped back. "But I—" He held up a hand. "No. Sit down. Rest. That's enough." She stared. Then slowly, almost cautiously, she sat again. That night, she fell asleep with his coat pulled tight around her, curled up small but breathing easier. He watched her for a while, then returned to the capsule wreck and destroyed the locator core. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew one thing. He wasn't giving her back. The next morning, Tarnis V was quieter than usual. The wind had dropped, but the silence wasn't peace. It was the kind of stillness that made you listen harder. Jaren Thorne stood at the edge of his shelter's entrance, eyes on the scrapyard beyond the cracked plating and power line carcasses. He held a mug of heated nutrient broth in both hands, half drunk, steam rising into the cold. Inside, the alien girl, Sailira, still hadn't moved. She hadn't asked questions, hadn't wondered, hadn't even looked around the shelter. She'd slept like someone who didn't trust rest, arms still folded defensively even under layers of blankets and his old coat. The only sign she was truly asleep had been the twitch of her eyes beneath closed lids, like her mind was still running somewhere she couldn't escape. He watched her from the edge of the room for a while longer. Then he knelt and set a new cup of warm broth beside her. When she stirred, she flinched, clutching the coat tighter. "You're safe," Jaren said. "Still here." No one came. She didn't answer, but her eyes opened slowly. "Can you sit up?" he asked. She tried. Her body shook from weakness, and she had to brace against the cot frame to lift herself. The coat slipped slightly, revealing the top edge of her metallic bodysuit. The material dull, dirt-streaked, the straps near torn. Jaren turned away, keeping his voice steady. "I'll find something better for you to wear. Warmer. This place isn't built for people in show costumes." "I wasn't supposed to need warmth," she muttered. It was the first time her voice held more than a whisper. He turned back, surprised by the tone. There was shame in it, bitterness, something real. He crouched down to eye level. You weren't supposed to survive this moon either. Sailira looked away. Why do you help me? Because no one else will, he said simply. And because I don't like seeing people thrown out like junk. You think I'm people? Jaren stared at her for a long moment. You're not a machine. You're not a tool. That means you're someone. She didn't respond, but she picked up the broth and sipped it slowly, like she didn't trust her own hands. By midday, she could stand with help. Jaren gave her a thermal wrap, stitched from old mina gear, and helped her slip it over the bodysuit. It dwarfed her, but it was warm. She held onto the wall for balance. Her body trembled, not from cold anymore, but uncertainty. She glanced at the door several times, but never approached it. You're not a prisoner, he said. You can walk out any time. She nodded faintly, then whispered, I don't know where I'd go. He didn't answer. There was nowhere. Tarnis V wasn't a place for runaways. It was a graveyard with blinking lights. Anyone out alone too long got scanned, tagged, resold, or worse, recycled. She needed to know that. So he showed her. He helped her into a pair of thermal boots, handed her a scarf, and led her slowly out the back hatch of the shelter into the junk fields. They didn't go far, just to a high ridge overlooking the southern grid, where rows of old shuttle wrecks and hauler engines stretched like a scrapyard city. In the distance, low transport drones floated over the horizon, scanning for illegal transmitters. One turned, and Sailira instinctively crouched. They look for tech, Jaren said. Capsules, weapon cores, signal pings, and people. People come second. She shivered, adjusting the scarf. What happens if they find me? They'll call it retrieval. Then you're someone's asset again. If you're lucky. Sailira stood silently, arms crossed. The sun broke weakly through the clouds, casting dull, silver light across the wreckage. They said no one would want me, she said softly. That my mind was defective. That I'd failed every imprint attempt. Jaren glanced at her. Imprint. She hesitated. We were trained to bond. Fast. Artificial triggers. But I didn't respond right. Too many variables, they said. Sounds like you thought too much. A faint smile almost touched her lips. Almost. Then it was gone. That evening, Jaren worked in the engine bay while she sat nearby, wrapped in a thermal blanket, watching him dismantle an old comm unit. Her eyes kept following his hands, every tool he used, every motion he made. He noticed. Why do you watch my hands? He asked without looking up. She tensed. They're careful. He paused, glancing her way. Not all humans are, she added. Jaren set the tool down. You're not here to be touched, Sailira. You don't owe me anything. She lowered her eyes. I don't know how else to exist. He stood, walked to the wall locker, pulled out an old folded tunic, soft, worn, one of his spare work shirts. Try this, he said, offering it to her. She hesitated, then took it with both hands. Her fingers brushed his briefly. She looked at him, expression unreadable. Why? She asked again. He sighed. Because I can't unsee you now. You're real. That means I have a responsibility. She nodded once. Tight. Quiet. She didn't speak for the rest of the night. But before Jaren shut off the lights, he saw her changing into the shirt, sitting cross-legged on the cot. The fabric hung off one shoulder. The sleeves swallowed her arms. But she was warm. She wasn't chained. And for the first time since he found her, she didn't flinch when the wind howled outside. The air was colder the next day. A front had rolled in overnight, dropping the temperature below safe levels in exposed zones. Jaren reinforced the heat coils along the shelter walls and rechecked the exterior seals. The wind clawed at the metal, seems like it wanted in. Inside, Sailira sat silently at the table, wearing his shirt over the patched thermal wrap. Her bare feet hovered just above the ground, tucked beneath her. She stared at a heating unit like it was a living thing, both afraid of it and transfixed. She still hadn't asked to leave. She hadn't even asked how long she could stay. Jaren handed her a ration bar and sat across from her, a comm tablet in hand. He hadn't told her yet, not fully, what he'd found in the wreckage last night. The locator beacon. The capsule signal had pinged a black market relay. That meant someone had received it. Someone who might already be narrowing the grid. He looked up. How long were you in the capsule? She didn't look at him. Don't know. Woke up sometimes. Not for long. You were in cycles. Emergency stimulation kept your vitals running. They said it would preserve value. Her tone was mechanical, flat. He frowned. You remember who put you there? Salira nodded once. They were angry. My last bond broke within a week. I failed again. They said I made the males anxious. Jaren said nothing. They said I didn't respond properly. That I questioned things I shouldn't. They said I stared too long. That I didn't smile the right way. Did you? She looked at him now. I didn't know there was a right way to smile. Jaren leaned back in the chair, tired of hearing the same story in different forms. Systems treating people like programmable furniture. They're not looking for perfect people, he said. They're looking for obedient ones. Salira tilted her head slightly. And which are you? He paused. I'm the one who didn't follow orders. She didn't press, but she was watching him again, closely. Her gaze wasn't wide-eyed like before. It was sharper now, measured. Later, while he worked on the solar banks near the west wall, she came to him. Quiet footsteps. No sound until she was within arm's reach. He turned. Something wrong. She didn't answer at first, just studied him. Then, slowly, she untied the thermal wrap from her waist and let fall. Beneath it, she still wore the metallic bodysuit, ripped thin, frayed at the seams. The light caught on her exposed hip. Her skin was clean now, flushed slightly from the heater's warmth. She stood straight, arms at her sides. If you want this, she said calm, you can take it. Jaren froze. His breath didn't catch, but everything in him went still. Her voice didn't waver. She wasn't afraid. She was resolved. This wasn't begging. This was offering. Because that's what she'd been taught to do. He stepped closer, not fast, not harsh. Just one step. She didn't back away. He lifted the thermal wrap slowly and held it out. She stared at him. Put it back on, he said. Why? Because I want you to decide when you're ready. I am. No. You think this is the only way to be useful. That's not the same. She frowned slightly, confused. Her body tensed, like a stored command in her brain didn't know how to proceed without approval. He waited. Then, very slowly, she reached for the wrap. She pulled it up around herself, tying it in place again. I don't understand, she said. I know, he replied. You don't have to. Not yet. That night, after she had gone to sleep, Jaren sat alone at the workbench. The locator relay opened on the table before him. The signal had bounced 3 times. First through a low-orbit smuggler relay. Second, across a node used by freelance reclamation crews. Third, a corporate salvage tag had marked the signal as priority retrieval, Class 4B. That meant someone was coming, and they weren't coming to help. He sealed the relay shut, crushed the antenna core with a hammer, and burned the backup battery in a heat sink. It wasn't enough. Not if they had a general grid. He'd have to move them. Soon. The next morning, Salira was already awake when he opened his eyes. She stood at the tiny window, staring out at the ice-covered ruins in the distance. The light hit her face just enough to reveal something had changed. She turned when he sat up. I want to learn, she said. Learn what? Why you're not like them. He stood, rubbing warmth into his arms. There's not much to learn. I just got tired of pretending people were things. She nodded slowly. Then show me how to be something else. Jaren crouched low behind a collapsed hauler chassis near the eastern boundary of the scrapyard. Snow bit at the gaps in his gloves. His breath came slow and shallow, barely visible in the frozen air. 200 meters ahead, a black reconnaissance drone hovered just above the wrecks, silent but steady. No markings, no lights, not corporate freelancer tech. That was worse. Freelancers didn't ask questions. They didn't knock. They were paid to retrieve, and if they couldn't retrieve, they eliminated. He watched it scan a nearby bulkhead with a thin blue beam. It lingered, then moved on. Jaren didn't move until the drone passed out of view toward the next sector. He stood slowly, knees aching, and turned back toward the shelter, picking his way through jagged rebar and frozen piping. Every step was measured. If the drone had mapped even part of the heat signature from a bunker, he had hours left at best. Well, he got back inside. The smell of warm ration broth filled the air. Salira had taken the initiative. She'd figured out how to use the heating coil safely. She looked up when he entered, eyes scanning his face before he even spoke. He locked the door behind him, double-bolting it. She stood. "You saw something?" Jaren nodded, pulling off his gloves. "Recon drone. Freelancer model. Scouting the edge." She went still. Her hands reflexively clenched around the sleeves of his oversized shirt. "Is it for me?" "Could be. Could be for the capsule. Either way, it means someone's in range." Salira sat down slowly. "Then I need to leave." "No," he crossed the room. "We leave together. At night." She looked at him sharply. "You'd leave your shelter?" "It's just walls. I can build new ones." She hesitated. "Why risk that?" "Because the alternative is letting them take you. And I don't let people disappear into cages." That quieted her. He packed fast. Tools, nutrient paste, a water purifier, insulated blankets. She helped, folding items neatly, watching what he chose. For the first time, she didn't hesitate to act. She didn't ask permission. That night, while he worked on sealing the emergency sled hidden in the storage trench out back, she approached him, holding a folded cloth bundle. "I fixed this," she said quietly. He opened it. His spare work shirt, restitched at the seams, reinforced where the elbow had torn. Done by hand. It wasn't much, but it was real. Hers. "I don't know how to do much else," she said, avoiding his eyes. "But I want to be useful." Jaren looked at her. Not at the shirt. Not at the gift. "You already are." She glanced at him, confused, but didn't argue. They left before first light. The snow had stopped. Stars shone clearly above the wreck fields as they moved between the heaps of twisted steel and shattered cargo crates. Salira kept pace beside him, scarf pulled over her lower face, blanket wrapped around her frame like a cloak. She no longer flinched from the cold, or the darkness, or his nearness. At the edge of Sector 12, just as they reached the last boundary marker before the ridge trail, Jaren saw it. A second drone. This one wasn't hovering. It was watching, parked quietly behind a collapsed antenna array. Jaren pulled Salira behind a derelict loader unit and motioned for silence. "They're close," he whispered. "Too close." She whispered back. "We go around?" He shook his head. "We go through." "Through." "They won't expect us to cut straight across. It's unstable terrain, but it'll hide our heat signature." She nodded once. "No fear. Just focus." They moved fast, sliding down a frozen embankment, pushing past warped plating and fuel barrels, ducking under low debris fields. The old industrial zone beneath Grid 13 had long since collapsed into a series of tunnels and frost-choked trenches. Dangerous, cramped, but quiet. Midway through, she stopped. "What?" Jaren asked, crouching beside her. She pointed to the far end of the trench. Dim orange flickers reflected off the metal. "Firelight." He swore under his breath. "Scav group?" she asked. "No, not at this hour. Probably freelancers camping near the perimeter." He checked the charge on his kinetic torch. "Low." She touched his arm. "I can go first." "What?" "If they see anyone, better it's me." He shook his head. "No chance." She held his gaze. Her voice didn't tremble. "They don't know you're with me. If they think I'm alone, you can circle behind. Hit them from the ridge." Jaren stared at her. This wasn't submission. It was strategy. He gripped her shoulder. "If they move, run. Don't wait. Don't explain." She nodded, then stepped out of cover. She moved slowly into the flickering light, her body still wrapped in that blanket, posture guarded but calm. One of the men stood, raised the scanner. "Who the hell?" She didn't speak, but Jaren was already moving, circling around the ridge path, torch in one hand, a cold pipe wrench in the other. By the time they saw him, it was too late. Two men, one watching, one reaching for a weapon. Jaren hit the armed one first, square in the shoulder. The other turned, but Salira didn't flinch. She stepped in and threw the blanket over his face, disorienting him long enough for Jaren to slam the butt of the wrench into the man's side. Both crumpled, breathing hard. Jaren looked at her. She met his eyes. "You said not to wait." He let out a shaky breath. "Right." They didn't stop until they reached the far side of the ridge, where the stars began to fade into early dawn. They made camp in a hollow beneath an old calm tower, its antenna long shattered, its shelter walls mostly intact. Jaren started a heat core. Celira leaned against the wall, sweat on her brow, breath visible in the freezing air. He handed her water. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes. But, but..." She looked at him. Her voice was low. "No one's ever let me help before." "You weren't trained to help," he said. "You were trained to obey." She didn't respond. Then, quietly, "This feels better." He sat beside her. Not close. Not distant. They watched the light shift across the frost-choked valley. No words. Just survival. Together. The wind was quiet inside the tunnels. Not gone, just muffled, like it had been left behind with the scrapyard and everything they just outrun. The ice corridor stretched into shadow, the walls slick with frost and lightless reflections. Every sound echoed. Jaren's boots crunching against the frozen ground, the occasional drip of melting condensation, Celira's steady breathing beside him. They had entered through a collapsed drainage shaft near the southern edge of the old transport rails. The map he'd found months ago, etched onto a service panel in a decommissioned mining pod, said these tunnels had once carried coolant and data conduits beneath the colony transport lanes. Now, they were just forgotten veins running under a dying moon. He held a hand lamp in one hand, casting a wide cone of yellow light forward. Celira walked behind him, wrapped in the patched thermal blanket, her eyes alert but calm. She was silent, but her posture had changed. She walked upright now, not hunched. Her arms no longer stayed tightly folded across her chest. She scanned ahead as he did, not waiting for commands. It was the first time she had ever walked beside him with no hesitation. They passed a rusted relay junction, the walls narrowing into a single-person crawl space. Jaren stopped. He tapped a frozen pipe. "This passage leads east under the merchant sector. If we follow it to the vent tower, we can climb to the surface and head for the cargo flats." "Is that safer?" she asked. "No," he said flatly. "But it's faster." They took the narrow path. It was tight, barely enough space for his shoulders. He turned sideways to squeeze through, his coat catching on a protruding bolt. Behind him, Celira followed in silence. Halfway in, she spoke softly. "You've done this before." "Run?" he asked, not turning. She nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "Escape." "Yeah," he said. "Twice. The first time, it was from a burning orbital station. The second time, from the wreckage of my life." She didn't ask what he meant. They emerged into a wider service bay. The walls were lined with control panels, all dark. One still hummed faintly, its core battery leaking blue light into the frost below. Jaren crouched near it and scanned for heat signatures. Nothing immediate, but the relay lines were still live, meaning some part of the colony infrastructure above was active. Celira stood quietly at the edge of the room, watching him. Her eyes weren't scanning threats anymore. They were watching him, studying him. "You don't act like the others," she said. He looked up. "What others?" "The ones who looked at me like I was a solution or a promise." "I don't look at you that way." She shook her head. "You don't look at me like I'm supposed to give you something." He stood, walked over slowly. "Do you still think you have to?" She hesitated. "No, but the thought still comes." "Then we wait." "Until it doesn't." Celira swallowed. She sat down on a broken crate, drew the blanket around her shoulders, and looked away. Minutes passed in silence. Then, without a word, her body began to shake. It wasn't cold. It was something else. Her head dropped. Her shoulders trembled. Her hands tightened in her lap. Jaren stepped toward her, slowly. "Celira, I'm not broken," she whispered, voice cracking. "I know. I thought if I was useful, if I offered myself, maybe I wouldn't be left behind again." Jaren crouched beside her. He didn't touch her. "Just stay close. I don't know how to feel safe, even now, but I want to learn." Her voice broke at the end. For the first time, tears slid down her cheeks, not from fear or violence or pain, but from safety, from the unbearable tension of finally being allowed to stop running, even if just for a breath. He waited until her shaking slowed. Then, gently, he placed one hand near hers. Open, steady, not touching. You don't have to give anything to stay, he said. You've already stayed. She looked at his hand. Then, slowly, placed her fingers over his. Not clinging, not offering, just choosing. They stayed in the bay for an hour, resting, rehydrating, waiting for her breathing to settle. When they finally moved on, she walked beside him without glancing back. At the end of the corridor, he found what he'd feared. A tracking flare. Used recently. Someone's ahead of us, he muttered. Celira stepped beside him. Set an ambush? He turned to her, surprised. Not by the idea, but by how naturally she said it. Not as a plea, as a partner. Yeah, he said. We use the broken tower above. We climb at dusk. She nodded. I'll carry the gear. He handed her the lighter pack. Only if I take the heavier one. Deal. They climbed in silence, step by step through the frozen metal shaft, leaving behind a world where she was a possession and entering a future neither of them had a map for. But it was real, and it was hers now, too. The wind was sharp at the top of the tower. The hatch creaked open with rust-thick resistance, and Jaren hauled himself up first, scanning the ruins beyond the edge. The surface stretched in every direction, broken stonework, old pipeline ridges, and wrecked cargo skiffs half buried in frost. They were no longer hiding. This was where they'd make their stand. He turned and offered his hand. Celira emerged from the tunnel with quiet strength, her fingers tight around the strap of her pack. She gripped his hand briefly, not out of need, but solidarity. He helped her up and quickly closed the hatch behind them. They moved across the roof of the broken vent tower, crouching low behind the remnants of a vent coil. Jaren scanned the horizon through a cracked lens scope. There, he muttered. East quadrant. Two figures. Moving together. Light armor. Civilian-grade rifles. Probably freelancers. Following the flare trail? Celira asked. Jaren nodded. We're the only thing worth chasing out here. She settled beside him, pulling the scarf over her face again. Her eyes stayed on the figures. We ambush. We try, he said. If it fails, we run west. There's a broken service rail line. Gets us closer to the abandoned core stations. No one patrols there. She glanced at him. You sure about that? No, he admitted. But I'm not sure about anything anymore. They waited in silence. The two men closed the distance slowly, cautious, checking every shadow. Their steps were deliberate. Not amateurs. Jaren watched their movements, how they coordinated, the way they separated slightly, then rejoined. That meant training. Probably ex-security. Definitely dangerous. He turned to Celira. I'll take the lead. If I go down, run. Don't hesitate. No. He blinked. What? She looked him dead in the eye. If you fall, I don't run. I fight. Something about the way she said it, clear, grounded, without drama, stopped him cold. There was no performance in her voice. No fear. No need for validation. She meant it. The two freelancers neared the wrecked generator below the tower. Jaren raised his makeshift signal mirror, catching what little light filtered through the clouds. One sharp flick, then another. The first figure paused, raising his hand. The second one circled left. Classic sweep formation. Celira touched his shoulder. They'll separate. I know. That's our chance. He handed her the torch with a single nod. If they chase me, lead the second one through the coil gap. It narrows there. Forces him to slow. She nodded. Go. Jaren rose, moved fast, ducking down the stairwell and kicking a scrap panel to draw attention. The first freelancer shouted. The trap snapped. Both men split. The first one chased Jaren around the side of the tower. The second moved cautiously along the ridge path toward the access coil, right where Celira waited. She pressed against the wall, calm, breathing steady. Her fingers curled tightly around the scavenge pipe she'd carried since the tunnel. Her body shook once, not from fear but adrenaline. When the footsteps came close, she didn't run. She waited. And when a man stepped into view, she struck, fast, low, precise. The pipe cracked against his knee with a sickening crunch. He roared, stumbled forward. She didn't stop. She struck again, higher this time. Shoulder, then throat. He dropped. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She backed away, weapon still raised. He didn't move again. Jaren returned minutes later, limping, blood on his coat, a gash across his arm. He saw her standing over the downed man, shaking. She turned to him slowly. Her hands trembled. Her eyes didn't. "I didn't freeze," she whispered. He looked at her, at the tension still locked in her limbs, the pipes slipping from her grip, the rawness in her voice. "No," he said. "You didn't." She stepped toward him. "You're hurt." "It's shallow," he said, wincing. "He got a shot off. Barely clipped me." She touched his sleeve, fingers brushing the blood. She didn't flinch. Then, quietly, she removed the scar from her neck and tied it around the wound. Tight, efficient. Her voice dropped. "I don't want to survive alone." "You won't," he said. "Not now. Not ever." The air was still. Cold. But she moved closer. This time, she didn't wait for permission. She leaned into him, her arms wrapping around his ribs, her head resting against his shoulder. He stood there, breathing slowly, one arm across her back. It wasn't about protection. It was about connection. Later, they made camp behind the broken vent structure. Jaren cleaned the wound properly while Celira searched the freelancer's pack. She found maps, ammo, a transmitter, and something else. A corporate subfile, partially decrypted. Classified, Varellan Unit Reclamation Order Primary Asset Identifier. SAE, for LRA, Secondary. Class Override, Breeding Failure Override. She handed it to Jaren without a word. His jaw tightened. "They weren't going to take you back," he said. "They were going to erase you." "I know," she said, "but I'm not an asset." She stepped forward. Her hand touched his jaw gently. "I'm a woman," she said. He nodded. "Yes, you are." That night, for the first time, she chose to lie beside him, not as an offering, not from obligation, but because she was safe, because she wanted to. The ruins of the core station loomed like the skeleton of a forgotten god, half buried in frost, girders bent skyward, hangar doors frozen open at twisted angles. Snow drifted in through shattered observation windows. Jaren and Celira stood just inside the main causeway, the echo of their footsteps swallowed by silence. They were running out of time. The transmitter found in the freelancer's pack had pinged once more before Jaren crushed it under a power tool. That meant someone else knew their path. This place, Core Station 3, was a decommissioned logistics center near the equatorial ridge. No power, no active heat grid, but it had one thing that mattered: an old orbital escape shuttle locked in maintenance dry dock. If the interior systems held, they could launch it manually. If not, they'd freeze here cornered. Jaren moved first, sweeping a low-beam torch across the main concourse. "Follow close," he said. "I will," Celira replied, steady. They reached the subdeck control hall without incident. The shuttle was still there, covered in frost, partially stripped for parts, but intact. Manual override lights flickered. He exhaled slowly. "It'll fly." She looked up at the icy hull. "You're sure?" "No," he said, "but I want to believe it. They gotta work." Jaren rerouted auxiliary power from a portable battery bank. Celira stripped corroded circuits from a defunct loading arm and helped rewire the ignition relay. They worked in sync. No orders. No hesitation. An hour later, they had a working interface. Then the warning klaxon blared, low and long. A perimeter breach. Manual tripwire triggered near the north entrance. "They're here," Jaren muttered, fingers tightening on the bolt driver. "Where do we stand?" she asked. 10 minutes to charge. Maybe less. Then we punch orbit and hope nothing rips off the hull. She picked up the fallen freelancer sidearm. Then we buy 10 minutes. Jaren looked at her. "You don't have to." "I know," she interrupted. "I want to." He handed her a shock baton and met her eyes. "No heroics. If they flank us, fall back and seal the hatch. We finish this together." She nodded. They positioned themselves near the main bulkhead. The sound of boots echoed beyond the wreckage. 3 of them this time, faster, better armed, shouting commands. When the first one breached the corridor, Celira moved. She ducked under a shot, rolled low, and fired back, once sharp and clean. The man dropped. Jaren flanked the next, using debris as cover. A sharp crack from the batten, a grunt, then silence. The last man hesitated. Wrong move. Sailira stepped out from behind cover, shoulders back, eyes locked on him. He raised his weapon. She didn't flinch. He fired. Nothing. Jaren had jammed the rifle before the ambush. The man barely turned before Jaren dropped him with a blow to the ribs. Then, quiet again. Only their breathing filled the corridor. Sailira's hand trembled on the sidearm. He walked to her, slow. She didn't look away. He reached up and gently lowered her arm. "It's done," he said. She blinked hard. "I kept waiting for the fear. It didn't come. That's because you're not who they said you were." She let out a long, unsteady breath. "I'm not." They boarded the shuttle together. The override panel bust. Fuel flow engaged. Old engines groaned awake. The interior lights flickered to life. Sailira sank into the co-pilot's chair and looked around slowly, like she was still waiting for someone to tell her no. No one did. "Where do we go?" she asked. Jaren keyed in a coordinate drift. "Beyond sector law. Edge colonies. Someplace cold, quiet, free." She leaned back. "Free," she echoed. The countdown started. 10 seconds. Jaren reached for the harness. Then paused. Sailira had already reached for his hand. Not as a question, but as an anchor. He held it tight. When the shuttle roared to life and broke through the clouded atmosphere of Tarnis V, the world below shrank into gray silence. Sailira looked out the window. Her voice was soft, steady. "I'm not property. I'm not broken. I'm not for sale." Jaren looked at her, exhausted, bruised, alive. "No," he said. "You're yours now." They didn't speak again for a long time. They didn't need to, because she had chosen this. Not survival, not servitude, but life. And the man who helped her take it back. The wind on Ellerin 3 was nothing like Tarnis V. It was warm, light, dry. It stirred the long grass instead of biting through flesh. And when it rained here, it didn't freeze. It smelled of earth and new things growing. Jaren Thorne stood outside the small structure he'd built with his own hands, half covered in dust and sweat, a plasma hammer slung at his side. The house was simple, metal, timber, old shuttle plating converted into a roof. But it was theirs. A clean water line from the nearby ridge. Solar panels on the hill behind. A cooling vent for summer. Enough. He turned at the sound of footsteps behind him. Sailira approached barefoot through the grass, wearing a long, sun-dyed tunic he'd traded for on the first supply run into the nearest outpost. Her hair was down, long and white, now clean, tangled by the breeze. She didn't cover her skin anymore. She didn't walk like she expected to be punished for speaking. She walked like she belonged. She carried 2 mugs, one for him, one for her. "Filtered tea," she said, holding one out. He took it with a grin. "How civilized." "It's tradition," she replied, mock formal. "We survive another day without someone shooting at us." He looked at her for a moment, eyes searching, like he still wasn't used to having days like this. "You sleep all right?" She nodded. "I did. No bad dreams this time." A pause. Then she added, "I woke up, and the first thing I felt was sunlight. Not cold, not fear, just warmth." Jaren leaned against the doorway and sipped his tea. "That's what I wanted for you." She smiled faintly. "I know, but now I want it too. For me." He let that settle. Inside, the small home was quiet. Blankets folded, tools lined up neatly. A small comm unit blinked silently on standby. She had started keeping the place organized, her way. Not out of obligation, but comfort. She stepped close to him now, placing a hand on his chest. "I never thought I'd have a day like this," she said, "where I could just stand still. You earned it." She tilted her head. "You stayed. I will." There was silence between them, not heavy, gentle. Then she leaned up and kissed him. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't transactional. It wasn't her offering something. It was her choosing something. Him. Later, they sat on the rooftop with their tea, watching the second sun dip below the far ridge. Birds circled. A shuttle blinked in the sky, far overhead, bound for some other sector they'd never need to see again. Sailira's head rested on his shoulder. "I was created for someone else's idea of value," she said quietly. "But here with you, I feel real. You are. And I want something real now, she added. Her hand rested gently on her stomach. Jaren looked at her. His eyes softened. She didn't smile. Not fully. But her voice was steady. It's early, but it's mine. Ours. He took her hand, held it tight, and let out a quiet, grounded breath. They didn't celebrate. They didn't speak for a long time. They just sat, side by side, under two suns, on a planet no one cared about, where no one would come and take her back. And for the first time in either of their lives, the future wasn't something to fear. It was something to build. Together.